Hello and welcome along to TGP Has A Podcast. This is episode 3 of our third series now of the season, and this week we've got a really special guest. We've got a TGP legend, quite possibly the greatest driver that TGP has seen over this series. He has won multiple TGP1 championships, he still holds the record for championships and race wins in TGP1. He is of course James O'Connor, and we had a chance to have a sit down and a chat about his career in TGP and what he's got coming up for us in the future. We hope you enjoy. James, good evening. Welcome to TGP Has a Podcast. We've been desperate to get you on here and have a chat with us, and finally been able to make an appearance in season 3. You are, without doubt, TGP royalty to a certain degree. You know, you are one of the most successful TGP1 driver in terms of race victories, in terms of championships, and it's only pole positions that you're not top on. You've had an incredible time in TGP series, but as I said, we've been so looking forward to having you on the show. So obviously, first of all, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, Mike.
So we've got some great questions we're going to be running through with you this evening, and obviously this is going to be going out in a few days' time. But I mean, when TGP first began, you were obviously in the very first season of TGP1, all the way back on F1 2010. What are your sort of first memories of getting involved in the series?
Well, as the name TGP suggests, it was through Twitter. I, from what I remember, it would have been obviously through Dom and a few of the guys that still race today, Dan and also Ben, Lazy, and all those guys from the past. So yeah, I think that's pretty much how it started. And obviously, back then there was quite a few races every week.
Well, yes, and that's obviously what helped fuel the early season of TGP and growing its popularity and getting drivers like yourself and Dan and Ben Alesi the sort of names and successes that you did. But also, it was sort of establishing a league at the very beginning is tricky, particularly in those sort of early days when Formula One games were only just coming into. It's just come back, after sort of so many seasons away from console. Was that something you were always interested in doing when you got hold of F1 2010, or was that sort of a sort of community you stumbled upon?
No, league racing was something I never thought about. Like I would have had like the old F1 games on PlayStation 2, like and then F1 Championship Edition on PS3, but I never thought about league racing. But then obviously I came across Dom and yeah, I signed up for it.
And that was obviously a huge step for you. And in those early seasons of TGP1, I think in the first season itself, we only had about 10 drivers, I think it was, and you were in theory last in the standings. It didn't take a race victory, and didn't take a pole position as well, if I remember rightly. So you didn't sort of, I guess, hit the ground running. And I think season 2 was just as much of a struggle for you, season 3 and even season 4. So was it that F1 2010 game just didn't really suit your driving style? Was it a game that you struggled to really hit the ground running on?
Honestly, no, I wouldn't blame the game. I was just quite naive. From what I remember, I wouldn't have run a setup, which was obviously that kills your lap time. Yeah, just and then I think I had traction control off, so if I touched the curb or got in the power too early, it was doing a Sebastian Vettel basically. So yeah, that wasn't. Um, I was a bit out of my depth back then, if I'm being honest. I think.
And that was sort of what you think your reasoning was for struggling, because obviously the F1 2010 game as well and its sort of handling was relatively arcade-like. So that was another reason why you think you struggled, perhaps.
Nah, I don't think so. I think the handling was all right. It's just, yeah, I was naive. I think really with no setup, and yeah, I wasn't able to drive the car without traction control, but I still persisted with it. So yeah, I would be spinning and very slow. So yeah, it was a bad mixture.
Yes, and and it's all sort of getting to grips with it really. So that was sort of the earlier times in TGP1 and obviously league racing, and then F1 2011 came out, and that's when you started hitting the big time a little bit. Season 5, it would have been the first season. Um, on F1 2011, and you finished fifth in the seventh, sorry, in the standings. Still yet to take that first race win, and then obviously season 6 followed up with a sixth place. You were sort of gradually getting better, but still eluding you was that race win. And how frustrating was that after as long as it was? Because it was still a couple of seasons after that until you did take that race win. How frustrating was that for you as a driver?
Um, Thinking about it probably was frustrating, but yeah, I mean the likes of Ben, Knievel, Dan, those guys. I mean they were just a step ahead the whole time, really, on those games. It was when I really started using traction control that the big performance leap came. So yeah, I have to thank the assist, to be honest.
Of course, and then it was not until season 10 when you finally won a race, and not only did you win a race, but you won a championship as well. From Benalesi, who up until that point had been so dominant, taking a couple of championships by that time himself. How did you feel when you finally got that championship and that, well, not only that, but obviously the race win that seemed to have been eluding you for so long?
Yeah, I think the first win was Suzuka. I think I just about beat Dan on the last lap. I think he might have made a mistake. I don't remember, but yeah, to win at Suzuka, like take the first win there was pretty special because it is my favorite track in the world. I just love it. And then yeah, season 10 was probably the season where I made the massive leap from I would say probably somewhere like fifth, sixth to challenging for wins. Yeah, and thankfully I won the championship. So that was, yeah, obviously a good moment.
So season 10 was a huge breakthrough for you, winning the championship, and you kept that competitive and dominance going, winning back-to-back titles and winning something in the title again in season 11. It seemed like the sky was the limit at that point, and that credible run at the end of the season with the championship, which had looked so close for most of it. And then he went on this it's an incredible run, winning the last 7 races in a row. Very Sebastian Vettel-esque.
Mm-hmm.
7 back-to-back race wins from Italy through to Brazil. Is that a period of your racing where you look back and think that that was when you were perhaps racing at your best, or did you just find a bit of a sweet spot in the setup, or?
I'd say the setup, yeah, was as the games progressed, I would work quite hard on setups, particularly in the race. Obviously, my pole position record is not as fantastic as the race wins. I'm just, I just prefer races. I prefer to set the car up for longer distance over one lap. Obviously, back then it was probably a bit easier to follow compared to the current games, I would imagine. But yeah, yeah, it was a good period. But obviously, I practiced a lot, which I think helped.
And obviously getting that back-to-back string, as we said, is what was able to clinch you the title, beating Benalesi in the end by 40 points, who you were teammates with, obviously, in your first championship at Sauber, and then joined Dom at Williams. And obviously, this is when TGP was really starting to kick off in its popularity. We had, by the end of F1 2011 and season 11, which was the last season, we'd had 25 drivers which competed through the season. All teams scoring some great points. Was that when you sort of thought, and you could see that TGP was really starting to gain some momentum, and you were obviously glad that the league was growing?
Oh yeah, I mean the more quality in the on the grid, the better for the league. Like even though I haven't raced now for I don't know a couple of years, I mean there's plenty of quality drivers. Look, obviously what Isaac did, he won I think TGP2, and now he's a Veloce esports driver. So for me, people that means the league is success because it's brought people through to stuff like Isaac is doing.
Yes, but obviously your season 11 title didn't come without a bit of controversy. you clashed with Ben Alesi, obviously your title rival, and which is a teammate from previous season before. But it didn't really seem to sort of dissipate from then. I mean, yourself and Ben crashed with one another at the Nürburgring, which you then got a penalty for in the stewards' room afterwards. I mean, did you feel that was sort of fair? Did you feel you ended up racing with Ben a little bit different than others after that?
Um, well, from what I remember, the Nurburgring was my fault at the time. Obviously, I was pretty angry over the loss of my dad, to be honest. So I was taking league racing too seriously, and yeah, I did go over the line at the Nurburgring. I probably blamed Ben at the time, but it was 100% my fault. Looking back on it, from what I remember of the incident. So yeah.
And obviously thereafter, did you feel that the racing with Ben was a bit more tense, or was that sort of water under the bridge in your mind?
I'd say it was probably more tense because I think there was probably quite a few rows back then. Again, that's probably more on me, if anything, for the reasons I just explained. But yeah, I've no issue with Ben at all. He was a very quick driver, and yeah, so there's no problem there for me.
Oh well, of course, and it's great to be able to sort of look back on these and sort of see it from that sort of perspective, really. Obviously, then coming into F1 2012, if I recall, sort of season 12 and 13, you sort of step back from TGP for a while, and I think a couple of seasons sort of then after as well. Um, did you sort of did that sort of time away make you look forward to coming back to it more when you eventually did, or how do you sort of remember being then?
Well, I think Roy came into the league around then, and I kind of helped him a bit. So I was like, I may as well do something useful. But yeah, I think probably wanted a break, and yeah, then I came back.
Well, you came back, and you came back in a great way. I mean, we had that amazing um, four-way TGP1 title decider, which you won ahead of Jean, Dan, and Dean in season 20, beating Jean in the end by 4 points, which is actually something we've done our own podcast about in a previous series, which you can go back and have a listen to. This was predominantly down. Obviously, it was a fantastic season leading up to that, but where things really changed was mainly down to a brilliant call from yourself to pit for wets with a couple of laps to go in Italy, which was the penultimate race. What sort of inspired you to go that? Was there anything that was sort of happening? Do you remember that race particularly well, or?
Yeah, this probably is, or this would be my favourite season that I've competed in because I mean to win the title as I did was pretty mental. Yeah, Monza itself. In the dry, Gene was quicker. Gene and Dan were too quick. I don't know. Normally, back then, I would have the pace to be with them. But in that day, for some reason, in the dry, I couldn't stay with them. But then in the wet, I was quicker, which was a very big surprise because normally Gene and Dan and Dean would have been quicker in the wet. But yeah, that day I was quicker. And yeah, the grip was just starting to go a little bit more on the inters after we changed inters. So I thought, okay, I've got nothing to lose here, so I put on the wets, and then obviously Gene started sliding massively around the track, and I managed to pass him on the last lap before Ascari. So yeah, that was ultimately the championship winning call.
Yeah, it was an incredible event, as we said. It was something that we did a previous podcast about, and it would have been great to have had you on there. But talking about it now is pretty awesome. And coming then into the last race of the season at Abu Dhabi, what were you expecting that it could happen?
As long as I outqualified Gene, I knew I had a chance because Dean, obviously fellow Irishman, so there was definitely some some help from him there.
Yes,
And
he did a
yeah,
good job for you that day.
yeah, he took pole just about from me, from what I remember. And then
Yes, he did. Yes.
turn one was nice and convenient. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, well, and it was fantastically entertaining last race as well, which you can obviously go back and watch in TGP's archives too. Then season 21, another title. Jean at this point still was title-less, and he was getting, I think, very frustrated at your now fourth title and the second time that you've taken sort of back-to-back titles. How did this one rank in the titles at that point? Obviously, the one before was perhaps a little unexpected and a heart-fought sort of episode, whereas
Um,
this one was a bit more sort of close between you and one other.
uh, 21, I think. Like, it's obviously with season 20, I knew I had good pace, so coming into 21, I was fairly confident I could get the job done, and thankfully I did. I honestly don't remember too much of the season, but I think it went pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you ended up winning the title by nearly 60 points, just under 60 points. And then the last season on F1 2014, season 22, you sort of stepped away, if I recall, for most of the season, not doing a huge amount of races. Your team was with Dan, who likewise wasn't doing very much and not doing very well in the Toro Rosso, so not really obviously much activity happening there. Now, obviously, this was before drivers like Softcop and Ace of Pace came in, and it was still sort of very much and I'm going to say this sort of in inverted commas, such like the TGP. This is the last sort of game of the TGP old school, really. Um, how do you think sort of things had gone for TGP up until that point in those first 20 something seasons that it was?
Well, for it to last that long, I think, first of all, is a testament to Dom for running such a great league. I mean, it was it now? It must be 11 years, I think, in July. So,
Mm.
or 11 or 12 years. So that's just, yeah, crazy, really. Yeah, I mean, it's the last few years. Obviously, more and more drivers have come on board, and the quality, I think, to be honest, is in TGP1 has gone up for sure.
For sure, for sure, and obviously after having some time away, you did come back to TGP series, of course, and came back with a bang as well. Let's not forget, you went on and took another further two titles, which is just sort of excellent, really. How do you sort of feel that all progressed? Do you feel sort of quite honoured that you were able to sort of have that success later on as well?
Oh, of course, the more the if you have success on different games, it's a great feeling because it doesn't mean you're just a one-trick pony. To be honest.
Well, obviously, season 27, you took the title ahead of Ritson and Paul McGuinness after Flexi had just won the title the season before, if I remember rightly. And I don't know, maybe we'll have a future podcast about Flexi at some point soon. That would be jolly entertaining. Um, but you were able to have a sort of, I guess, a title fight in theory with Softy, who is obviously now just a title behind yourself. Back in season 30, when you finished second to him, is he a driver that you've enjoyed racing against?
I haven't raced him that much, to be honest. He's since he came on board, really, he's been generally quite a bit quicker than me. So for me, although he's obviously one title behind, I would put him above myself as like if you're ranking TGB greats, obviously he has to be right up there.
But you would sort of say that he sits ahead of you in the standings, I guess, so to speak, would you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there'll be a few drivers, not even just because of titles, just because of who they are as well. Like Court, he only won his first title a couple of weeks ago, but he's for me he's a class guy and driver. Roy as well, on various games he's won titles. So people like that, and Dan obviously his first pole must have been in 2010, 2011, and then he's still taking poles and wins now. So that shows his great versatility.
And and you mentioned obviously Softy. Then you probably rank him sort of higher. Is he the person that you see having the best chance of surpassing your titles record?
Oh yeah, I mean if he wants to race on future F1 games, for sure he'll take all the records that are there. But that's racing. Records are there to be broken. It's not going to change my life.
And you think he will soon enough?
Uh, It depends what he does. He race on F1 20. I don't know if he's racing next season. If he does, he can at least tie then and take the win record, I'd say. Yeah.
And talking of sort of racing on um, F1 games, etc., are we going to see a return of yourself in TGP1 anytime soon?
Uh, who knows? Honestly, at the moment, I would say no, but you just never know. At the moment, I don't particularly enjoy the Codemasters games. There's just too many bugs and tracks that aren't realistic for my liking. So we'll see.
It's been unfortunately a feature of games, hasn't it, recently to a certain degree, and you've had to master it as well, haven't you, to as well to a certain extent. And if you haven't been able to get on top of certain parts, it's not been easy. And would you say that setup has become more of a part of F1 games than it has been before in the past?
Honestly, I don't think so. It's more the game's gone towards wheel users, which is fair enough, obviously, with the prices they pay for the rigs to play racing games on PlayStation, and then obviously no assist as well. And that's right. That's how it should be. Anyone who uses no assist should have an advantage. So I think it's gone that way, which is not a problem for me because it's the way it should be.
And you're still, when you've been racing recently, I guess, using certain assists in that case, then things like traction control, ABS, have you? Or...
Yeah, and that's obviously I don't. I think that holds you back, but I mean. Personally, I don't have the ability to be running everything off at the moment, and maybe I never will, but that's life.
Well, you've got to be a master of what you got, and you've made a great success of running them with it on, and that's certainly something that you can't turn your nose up at. And you mentioned obviously Court and Roy a couple of times already. They've obviously had great successes in TGP GT. Now, obviously, TGP GT is a discipline that only sort of came into effect in 2020 during the sort of COVID-19 pandemic, that when that was sort of pushed forward to be a race series. But it's something that you were always sort of campaigning to get a racing league in. Were you sort of excited yet frustrated when that season was announced in 2020?
Oh yeah, I was very happy. I mean, I would have been playing. I would have been playing with Roy for a good, I don't know, 3 4 years, and yeah, I just absolutely love the game. Now that is a game I can actually drive without traction control. I just find it more realistic. The tracks and the racing is really really good. There's no DRS either, so you can just it's pure racing for me.
And was there any sort of disappointment that that series that league wasn't brought into play any earlier than 2020?
Well, it would have been nice to have had it sooner, but at least it's here now, and hopefully it's here to stay. Because I mean, I think everyone who's taken part in it can say they've enjoyed the 3 seasons, or at least most drivers. I would hope.
Oh, it's certainly been very popular, but it's not something. Obviously, you mentioned racing with Roy in the game for quite a while. He is incredibly fast in that discipline, but it's not something you've been able to sort of take a race win in or a pole position at yet. Why do you think that hasn't happened for you yet in the series?
I mean, Roy and Court, like they're, I think it's safe to say they're on another level to everyone else. Like they're just extremely fast. I mean, I haven't helped myself with the car choice, particularly season 3 with the Porsche. Yeah, it was just the wrong decision, and yeah, it bit me hard. But at least I got one podium.
And obviously, it's a very competitive league as well. Outside of um, Roy and Court, who sort of have made their own little sort of events and races further ahead. Have you enjoyed the battles that you've had sort of further down the field?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of fun, and yeah, a lot of great racing. Some with yourself, of course, and yeah, plenty of other drivers too.
And as you said, obviously you're hoping for more leagues on the game, and obviously as we're moving into GT7 now as well, perhaps having some seasons on that. Is that something that you're going to be looking forward to if that comes about?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, let's hope it happens, and then we'll see what happens from there.
And I guess that sort of in other terms, GT racing, would you say? Obviously, you mentioned in terms of racing on GT Sport as your favourite game, at least. Do you prefer racing GT cars than you do racing Formula One? I mean, what's sort of been your preference there?
Oh, I'd say if there was a very good F1 game and it was like much better wheel to wheel in turn, like the collision model is not exactly superb on Cold Masters games. But yeah, I think if you were to force me to choose, I would go with the F1 games. But at the moment, definitely I enjoy GT Sport, GT cars more than on F1 2021 or whatever recent Cold Masters game it might be.
And I guess that's sort of is something that could change, as you said, if something better comes along. But I mean, do you? It's aside from GT Sport, have you sort of found solace in any other GT games at all, or?
I would have played GT6 in the past, but honestly, my memory of it wouldn't be too great. But I'd imagine I enjoyed it for sure.
And something like an Assetto Corsa, that's never something that's interested you, is it?
I've played it a few times. It's very, very difficult for me.
Why's that?
Just I think the handling model mostly. I would need to practice more to get used to it.
And is that just in the sort of the cars handling through corners, I guess, mainly?
Yeah, yeah. I would say chicanes probably be the trickiest from what I can remember doing on it.
And obviously, if TGP perhaps were to go down the route of having an Assetto Corsa discipline series, that's something that would be of interest to you, would it? Or
Certainly consider it. Definitely, yes.
and I guess that for you, sort of looking back, is there a particular sort of moment within TGP One or a season or a race which has sort of stood out in your mind particularly well?
It has to be season 20 at Monza. To be honest, that's the one that would. That's always the one that would come to mind straight away for me as the as memorizing the race and just the memory of it in general because of how crucial it was.
So put us in your shoes. You were chasing the pack. Rain was starting to come down. There's 2 laps left. Johners seems to be in control. What's sort of going through your mind at that moment when you're thinking about what to do?
Well, from what I remember, like I think the first half of the race was dry. Then we switched to inters. I was second. Then I overtook Gene at some point before. Must have been lap 12, I think, maybe. And then at the end of lap 11, I pitted for wets. So yeah, Gene did the opposite. I could feel, as I said earlier, I could feel the grip going on the inters, so I switched to wets, and then it was just a matter of hoping that I made the right call, and I did. Quickly chased Gene down on the last lap and passed him before Ascari, and then across the line. Yeah, I was fired up when I crossed the line. I was very pleased indeed with that.
And do you think if you perhaps hadn't got that result, obviously despite the difference in points that it obviously gave you the advantage of, you know, if things had been different, but you still were sort of in the championship hunt going into Abu Dhabi, do you think you could have done it?
Oh, I think if Gene had won, no, it was done.
Oh, can you hear me?
There was yeah, just yeah, we'll have to start that again because my headset turned off. Sorry.
Some fantastic technical difficulties for the TGP series of the podcast. Um, so yeah, yes. I mean, do you think that if obviously the results have been different, but you'd still been kept in the title hunt going into the last race, do you see the same outcome happening with you winning the title?
Yeah, if Gene had won, no chance. It was. I think it would have been something like 20 points, so that would have been game over.
And but you obviously you having just won that race, taking it on the last lap, you were probably obviously quite a bit more fired up to do it as well. I guess were you?
Oh yeah, I mean that race win just yeah, I think would have definitely given me a lot more motivation for Abu Dhabi because then it was truly game on.
And how does it feel, sort of thinking that you've got the TGP records that you have? You know, you're the most successful driver in TGP One, the flagship discipline for the TGP series. Does that mean something to you?
Um, I don't think about it too often, but of course it's definitely a thing to be proud of. There's no doubt about it. Clearly, it's going to be taken at some point, probably by Softy, but I mean, fair play to him when he does it. Yeah, but for to have the win record and the championship record is pretty cool. All right, I won't lie about that.
And obviously, as we've spoken about, thinking that Softy might get to your wins and or championships record, and if he sort of comes back, the likelihood of that or not. Will you miss having those?
A few years ago, probably would have said yes, but not now. Honestly, now that I'm 30, quite old, no.
And obviously, sort of away from TGP series to a certain degree, you know, you're still sort of very well followed, etc. on Twitter and such like, and have got quite a good sort of following in Italy, etc. Does that mean quite a lot to you now in the sort of the F1 Twitter community? Is that something that means quite a lot to the James O'Connor of today?
Um, I mean, I appreciate anybody who follows me. It doesn't really matter where they're from or who they are. As long as there's respect, I'm fine with that.
And do you sort of enjoy that sort of community that's sort of grown there? Do you? Or?
Well, I mean, let's say for example, like TGP, like that's been a great community for over a decade now. For example, I mean, there's plenty of well, I can't swear, but there's plenty of toxic stuff on Twitter on F1 community and just in general. But yeah, yeah, I mean, there's parts of it I enjoy, and that's what matters.
Now, obviously, as we know, a huge Kimi Räikkönen fan we've got in this podcast today. What was it that sort of made you fall in love with the Iceman? What was it that sort of attracted you to him initially when you started watching?
Well, I started in '99, and it just immediately wanted to support Mika Hakkinen, and to be honest, I think it's just the Finnish way. They just drive and don't talk too much. Like I would say away from. I can be quite loud, I suppose, on the internet at times, but in general, I would say I'm pretty quiet, and I just like that. I just like the way they went racing and didn't talk too much. Yeah, so that's what started with both of them.
And how difficult was it when he retired for the first time back in 2009? Did you find that quite difficult?
No, because I don't know why, but I had a gut feeling he would always come back, and luckily he did some rallying, so there was still the opportunity to follow him.
And obviously you were able to during that time, I guess, and enjoy watching him there.
Yeah, the results weren't great, but at least he had.
No, they weren't,
finishes.
were they? They were particularly patchy.
Yeah.
And obviously he had his brief spell in NASCAR as well, which was a little bit mundane, but it was interesting nonetheless. And then obviously his return back in 2012. Did you think he'd have as much success as he did?
Honestly, I would say it was actually probably a bit disappointing, the second spell. I mean, he just wasn't the same driver as he was in the first spell, and yeah, I think he only had 3 wins, so yeah, it wasn't great.
And so we're going to sort of finish off the podcast in the same way that we sort of usually do, with some sort of quick fire questions. Now, one of them you've already alluded to an answer with already, but it would sort of be interesting to find out a little bit more why the answer is what it is. Obviously, your favourite track in TG or in any racing game, you mentioned very briefly earlier, was Japan. Why is it that is?
Oh, I mean, where do you start? Like, it's just high speed. It's high speed. It's like just a happy drug for me driving that circuit. The high speed, it gravel. There's not too much tarmac run off gravel. Sector 1 is just, I mean, it's mind blowing, and then the Dagners, it's just the whole track is incredible. I just love it so much.
And what's your least favourite track you've raced on?
Oh, Wouldn't be the biggest fan probably of Singapore. I just, for me in real life, I don't enjoy it. There's a lack of racing, and Monaco as well. I mean, Monaco's a challenge on the racing games, and in qualifying in real life, it's epic. But I'm not the biggest fan of street circuits, to be honest.
And what? Obviously, we talked about your favourite race again. You've taken part in the TGP series, that Monza race. What would you say has been your least favourite?
Probably nearly all of them on F1 2010 when I was last, I'd say.
It's been tricky. And who would you say you've most enjoyed racing against in TGP in the past?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of names. I'll probably forget some, to be honest. But Roy, I've always had great racing. Roy, he's probably the cleanest driver I've ever raced against. He's just so respectful and classy. And then Dan, Jean, all the people I've known for a long time. Yourself. So yeah, I had too many names to think of.
And anyone you've particularly not enjoyed racing against before?
Probably tennis, I'd actually say, to be honest. I know that will not amuse Dom, but yeah, I would say tennis.
Well, we want you to be honest. We don't want you to respond thinking of Dom. Well, James, you are without doubt TGP royalty, and we hope that you've got many more seasons left in you in various different disciplines, maybe back in F1, but certainly in GT Sport and TGP GT should that come back. But is there a game that you would have always liked to have seen TGP do a season in?
F1 2006 / Championship Edition. That's probably my favorite F1 game ever.
It was a very good game. It would have been good to have had that. Well, James, thank you again. As I said, it's been an absolute honour to have this time sort of chatting to you here, and we really hope, as I said, that there's more to come for James O'Connor in the future. But any last words that you've got for us today?
Well, I just want to say thanks for inviting me on, and thanks to Dom for not kicking me out when I was probably at my worst racing. So yeah.
Surely not. Well, James, thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you on track soon.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mike.
So there we have it. James, the legend, the man who has won more than anyone else in TGP1, and surely is going to hold the record for a little while longer, unless other drivers like Softcop have anything to say about it. Next week, we'll be chatting to Phil Bardrill, arguably the oldest man in TGP, and one with a lot of history in the series. But until now, goodbye.